Balder is one of the signature rides at Liseberg amusement park in Gothenburg, Sweden. It is one of only 4 Intamin Pre-Fabricated wooden roller coasters ever built. The others, of course, being El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure, T-Express at Everland, and Colossus at Haida Park. And as of when this video is being made, this and El Toro are the only 2 prefabs I have done, because when I went to Haida Park, Colossus was closed. But coming from El Toro, I had pretty high expectations for this ride, but did Balder meet them? That is the topic of today's review. And let me just start off by saying that this ride is actually pretty different from El Toro. And personally, I think I would have liked it a lot more if I had ridden this first instead of El Toro first. But that doesn't mean that you should just disregard Balder. I mean, we got some pretty impressive stats here. 118 feet in the air, a 70-degree drop, which is banked, by the way. We'll get to that later. 56 miles per hour, and a pretty good track length, 3,500 feet long. Now, if you've been to Liseberg, you know that this is a pretty compact park. It's located in a downtown area, and so they really had to get clever with how they fit the rides in. Balder is able to be such a long ride because it continues to wind under itself 3 different times. Unfortunately, that means that the layout gets pretty repetitive, which for a lot of rides, you don't necessarily mind. There's plenty of wooden coasters out there where all they do is go over airtime hill after airtime hill, and that's it. Balder is essentially made up of 2 different elements: airtime hill and turn. But with some rides, while I don't mind the repetitiveness, this is one where I actually think the ride kind of suffers from it. The other issue being that because the layout continues to wind under itself, it means that the physical elements can't be that large. They can't have a high apex or a low pullout. You have to draw out the airtime hill. So it looks like what Intamin did with this was say, instead of having larger, crazier elements, let's opt for just more of them. So in this case, I feel like Balder ends up being more quantity over quality. And I know not everyone is going to agree with me on that. I know this ride does have its fans, but personally, I found this ride to be fairly underwhelming. You have all these impressive stats, but to me, this almost felt like a family wooden coaster. Or maybe just a tamer wooden coaster. It wasn't super forceful. The airtime was enjoyable, but it wasn't anything crazy, which I think is kind of surprising, honestly. I mean, I'll preface that I haven't exactly gotten a ton of rides on this. I only visited Liseberg for 1 day. I did get to experience this ride in the front and back row. Interestingly enough, I actually preferred it in the front. I thought the airtime was better, and you could feel the speed a bit more, which if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I do almost always prefer the back row, but not with Balder. Maybe if I had ridden a few more times, you know, my opinion would change. And I'd love to go back to Liseberg to experience this ride again, see how my thoughts change. But as of when this video is being made, this wasn't exactly a ride that I was jumping up and down about. I mean, it might sound bad, but frankly, my favorite thing that I got to do with Balder was I got to actually sign it. We were led on a backstage tour, got to go right up against the structure. We were passed a Sharpie, and we got to autograph a piece of wood on it. So if you happen to find yourself in the same situation, look out for my signature. It's somewhere on there. I don't know too many parks that offer something like that, so I thought it was super cool that I got to leave a little piece of me over in Sweden. Let's get a little bit specific, talk about some key moments of Balder. One of the first main differences that you'll get to, at least comparing this to El Toro, is this actually has a chain lift as opposed to a cable lift. This is the more traditional approach with a wooden coaster. I mean, granted, El Toro did come after Balder, so you can kind of see how they learned from this ride, you know, this ride being a stepping stone for them in their process of creating new and better rides. That all being said, this is not a slow climb up to the top. You still go up pretty quickly, which is awesome. When you reach the peak, you turn to the right, and what's strange here is most of the time with a wooden coaster, when you start to turn off the lift, you keep yourself level. Well, not with Balder. You start to bank, and you follow this bank all the way through until about halfway down the drop. It feels very GCI-ish, but even then, not entirely. In a way, this is kind of its own unique thing. If I had to draw any direct comparisons to it, I would probably bring up Apocalypse at Six Flags Magic Mountain, or maybe Woden at Europa Park. Those kind of do something similar. One thing though that this drop does do is because it kind of already starts off with that bank, I don't feel like it's as prone to airtime, even though it does hit that 70-degree angle. The drop does straighten out, and naturally when you sit in the back, I mean, you will get pulled down that thing, but I still didn't feel like this drop had anywhere close to the best airtime on the ride. Oftentimes the first drop is known for kicking you up out of your seat. Balder pretty much does that during the rest of the layout, which is made up of 1 or 2 small kind of bunny hills and then a bank turn. And I say small bunny hills because even though some of these hills are high up, like I mentioned earlier, they didn't over exaggerate the top or bottom. So what it does is each time you go over, you get kind of a gradual pop. It's a weird in-between between floater and ejector airtime. I'd say definitely leans more towards the ejector side, but it's almost its own unique feeling. I mean, probably the closest example I would bring to it is maybe something like what Phoenix does over at Knoebels. I mean, frankly, this airtime doesn't feel anything close to what El Toro does, even though those rides, from a manufacturing standpoint, are very similar. From a ride experience standpoint, they're so different, it's kind of crazy. El Toro is one of the most extreme rides in the world. This is a coaster that I think you could bring some kids on and they'd be fine. And not only that, I mean, hate me all you want, I personally don't think the layout is that strong. I mean, if you look at this, there's entire sections where it seems like there's a gap between two different elements, and so they just go straight. In between each element is a very gradual transition. So by no means would I use the word intense to describe this ride, which I mean could be okay, but here's the problem. I feel like this ride doesn't even know what it is. It's like it's having its own identity crisis, because you have a beginning with a 70-degree angle of descent, a fairly fast speed, but then the second half of the ride, it feels like a family coaster, a pretty mild experience. I'm not sure who the target audience for this ride is, because as a thrill seeker, personally, I didn't really care for it, and it might be too scary for a kid. In the hierarchy of rides at Liseberg, I mean, it's a bit more extreme than Lisebergbahnen, but I think you put kids on this before you put them on a ride like Valkyria or Helix. And so all in all, it just makes this a very strange ride to judge. It's just kind of alright. I mean, the best airtime in the park is on Helix, not Balder. But I mean, you can bash me in the comments if you think that I'm wrong about this. But as for me, Balder was a coaster that personally I thought was pretty forgettable. It's probably why I'm reviewing it 2 years after I wrote it. It wasn't high on my list for my favorite rides I got to do over in Europe. Nothing about it really stood out to me other than the fact that I got to sign it. So hate me all you want, but for its final score, I'm giving Balder a 5 out of 10. I can see how people would really enjoy this ride. If you like the style of airtime that it's going for, then yeah, I think you'll really like this. But personally, it wasn't for me. If you ask me, the better wooden coaster in Sweden is by far Wildfire. That's going to do it for my thoughts on Balder at Liseberg in Sweden. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this ride. If you think I'm wrong, let me know why. And of course, make sure to stay tuned for more videos here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.